Welcome, Alan and Andres.
Thank you very much, Florian. Thank you for hosting this, organizing this series. And it is my great pleasure to welcome somebody not unfamiliar to Hochschule Luzern, a familiar face, Alan Shapiro, an internationally known person, a software developer, computer scientist, also author and science fiction and media theorist. He has taught at numerous universities such as Folkwang University, Bremen, but also the well-known Bauhaus University in Weimar, has published numerous books and has been also a consultant for various institutions and international companies such as Swisscom, Volkswagen, and Deutsche Bahn. As in his talk revolves around Asimov's, the laws of robotics of Asimov, that are maybe currently much more in the public discourse than they were at the time when he wrote them. But many who quote these three laws of robotics are maybe not as familiar with the fantastic science fiction stories of Asimov. And so we decided that in my introduction to Alan Shapiro's talks, it would be worth to hear the original voice of Asimov and listen to some parts of one of his robot stories. As my own Asimov reader is in German, I will read the history in German, the story. And it's also a reminder that Alan Shapiro, while he will present in English, he will gladly accept questions after his talk in German. So let's listen to a story, to an Asimov Robotergeschichte, die auf Deutsch Lichtverse heißt, Light Verse in Englisch. Und ich lese nur Teile davon. Und zwar geht es hier um Mrs. Avis Lardner, die Witwe des bekannten Industriellen und Konzerngründers William J. Lardner, die in einer prachtvollen Villa von den Ausmaßen eines kleinen Schlosses wohnt. Und diese Villa ist ein wahrhaftiges Museum von Kunstwerken aus einem Dutzend verschiedener Kulturen. Und die Geschichte erwähnt dann, da waren natürlich ihre Lichtskulpturen. Wie Mrs. Lardner ihr eigenes Talent für die Kunst entdeckt hatte, vermochte kein Gast ihrer vielen glänzenden Empfänge und Abendgesellschaften zu erraten. Doch wann immer ihr Haus für Gäste geöffnet wurde, schimmerte eine neue Lichtsymphonie durch die Räume. Dreidimensionale Kurven und Formen in schmelzenden Farben, manche weich und irisierend, manche mit reinen, beinahe beängstigenden kristallinen Effekten, die jeden Anwesenden verblüfften und nie verfehlten. Mrs. Lardners bläulich-weißem Haar und ihrem hübschen Gesicht zu schmeicheln. Die Lichtskulpturen machten sie so berühmt, dass viele Gäste nur dieser einzigartigen Illusion wegen kamen, die sie in ihren neuen Formen und Effekten niemals wiederholten und ständig neue experimentelle Wege des künstlerischen Ausdrucks fanden. Viele Leute, die sich Lichtkonsolen leisten konnten, versuchten Ähnliches zu schaffen, aber niemand konnte sich mit Mrs. Lardners Genius messen. Nicht einmal jene, die sich für berufene Künstler hielten. Sie selbst war von bezaubernder Bescheidenheit, wenn sie darauf angesprochen wurde. Nein, nein, pflegte sie abzuwehren. Ich würde es ganz gewiss nicht Lichtpoesie nennen. Das ist zu viel der Ehre. Im höchsten Falle würde ich Lichtverse sagen. Und alle lächelten über ihre sanften Scherze. Dann mache ich einen Sprung. Es kommt eine zweite Figur ins Spiel, John Semper Travis. Introvertiert und freundlich zu jedermann war er in der Welt, aber nicht Teil von ihr. Er hatte die besondere mathematische Begabung, die ihn befähigte, den millionenfach geknüpften Teppich der positronischen Verbindungswege im Gehirn eines Robots auswendig zu kennen. Er war Chefingenieur der US Robots and Mechanical Man, aber er war auch ein begeisterter Amateur auf dem Gebiet der Lichtskulpturen. Er hatte sogar ein Buch darüber verfasst, worin er darzulegen versuchte, dass die kybernetisch-mathematischen Prinzipien, die für die Ausarbeitung positronischer Verbindungswege in künstlichen Gehirnen verwendet wurden, mit Erfolg für die Erzeugung ästhetischer Lichtskulpturen nutzbar gemacht werden könnten. Seine Bemühungen, diese Theorie in die Praxis zu überführen, waren jedoch ein enttäuschender Fehlschlag. Die nach seinen Prinzipien von ihm erzeugten Lichtskulpturen waren plump, mechanisch und uninteressant. Er war der einzige Schatten in seinem stillen, introvertierten und sicheren Leben, doch Grund genug für ihn, sehr unglücklich zu sein. Er wusste, dass seine Theorie richtig war, doch konnte er sie nicht in die Praxis umsetzen. Wenn es ihm nur gelänge, eine einzige wirklich künstlerische Lichtskulptur zu erzeugen. Natürlich war ihm Mrs. Lardners Lichtpoesie bekannt. Die Frau wurde im ganzen Land als Genie bejubelt, aber Travis wusste, dass sie nicht einfach einmal die einfachsten Aspekte der Robotmathematik verstehen konnte. Er hatte wiederholt mit ihr korrespondiert, aber sie lehnte es beharrlich ab, ihre Methoden zu erläutern, so dass er sich zu fragen begann, ob sie überhaupt welche hatte. Mochte es nicht bloß Intuition sein? Aber auch Intuition ließ sich mathematisch ausdrücken. Schließlich gelang es ihm, eine Einladung zu einer Abendgesellschaft zu erhalten. Er kam mit einiger Verspätung. Er hatte zu Hause einen letzten Versuch mit einer mathematisch vorberechneten Lichtskulptur gemacht und das Ergebnis war eine klägliche Enttäuschung gewesen. Er begrüßte Mrs. Lardner mit verwundertem Respekt und sagte, das war ein höchst seltsamer Roboter, der mir Hut und Mantel abnahm. Das ist Max, sagte Mrs. Lardner. Er ist fehlerhaft und ein ziemlich altes Modell. Wie kommt es, dass Sie ihn nicht zur Überholung der Fabrik eingesandt haben? Ach nein, erwiderte Miss Lardner, das wäre zu viel Mühe. Ganz und gar nicht, gnädige Frau, sagte Travis. Sie werden es nicht glauben, aber es war eine ganz einfache Sache. Da ich bei der US Robotics and Mechanical Man arbeite, nahm ich mir die Freiheit, ihn selbst einzustellen. Es dauerte kaum 10 Minuten und Sie werden finden, dass er wieder voll arbeitsfähig ist. Eine seltsame Veränderung trat in Mrs. Lardners Züge. Zum ersten Mal in ihrem Leben fand Wut darin Platz und es sah so aus, als wüssten die Gesichtsmuskeln den Ausdruck nicht zu formen. Sie haben ihn eingestellt, kreischte sie, aber er war es doch, der meine Listskulpturen schuf. Es war die fehlerhafte Einstellung, der Defekt, den Sie niemals wiederherstellen können. Und die Geschichte nimmt ihren Lauf und ich will so viel verraten, es endet nicht gut und wer den Rest gerne lesen möchte, der sei an die Geschichtensammlung von Asimov verwiesen. Und mit dieser Einstimmung möchte ich Alan Shapiro das Wort übergeben und ich freue mich auf seinen Talk. Alan.
Ja, ich musste mein Mikrofon wieder anmachen. Ich bedanke mich ganz herzlich bei Florian und Andres für die Einladung. In the Japanese anime novel series and television series Sword Art Online, there is a top secret advanced government technology project of the Japanese self-defense forces called Alicization, whose goal is to replace human soldiers in military deployments with artificial intelligence soldiers. This is not an unusual scenario for the American Pentagon or in science fiction narratives, except that instead of the usual cyborg soldiers, to achieve the aim of making the AI soldiers maximally efficient and flexible in combat situations, it is desired that they be endowed with a human-like consciousness. The project develops a technology to clone the consciousness of some human subjects. Scientists in the story repeatedly emphasize in their statements that there exists an enormous gap between an AI based on digital binary computer science as we know it and an AI of authentic human consciousness and self-awareness. Yet the narrative of Sword Art Online immediately reveals a blatant self-contradiction. The motivation for the Alicization project was to keep humans out of harm's way, to eliminate human casualties in war. This must be because humanist ethics has declared human life to be inherently valuable, inalienable, as the American Declaration of Independence says. Thomas Jefferson posited that this was self-evident, and the philosopher Immanuel Kant based it on pure reason. But presumably it is because humans have the capability of consciousness and freedom. It is morally acceptable for the AI soldiers to replace human soldiers in war because the AI soldiers are deemed to be expendable. They have no inherent right to life. But wait, once the AI soldiers attain consciousness, then they have exactly that which humans possess, which qualified them in the first place to have their lives protected. The self-contradiction of the Alicization project is clear and significant. A similar self-contradiction is at work in the narratives of Isaac Asimov's famous robot stories, collected under the title I, Robot, and in the brilliant 2004 science fiction film of the same name, directed by Alice Proyas, starring Will Smith as homicide detective Del Spooner. The film does not adapt to the screen any single one of Asimov's 9 I, Robot stories. It implements a new instance of the same overall pattern which underlies all the Asimov stories. Asimov invents and describes a universe in which robots are widely present in human society and are regulated by the imperatives of the 3 laws of robotics. In short, 1, do not harm a human. 2, obey the instructions of the human unless they tell you to harm another human. 3, protect yourself once you have satisfied the first 2 laws. In the I, Robot stories, the robots in various scenarios violate the laws. Their aberrational behaviors get investigated by robot psychologists and other power-holding authorities. Some examples: a robot and a child develop a deep emotional attachment. A robot who has an important organizational responsibility reasons, like René Descartes, that reality does not exist. In the story Liar, a robot develops telepathic abilities and is then forced to lie to not reveal to humans their secret, inconvenient truths. yet the robot's falsehoods also harm the humans. The literary genius of Asimov is that he imaginatively explores the creative tension between the three governing laws of robotics and the specific circumstances in which moral dilemmas and conundrums emerge. The contradiction between the laws and who the robots are becoming runs very deep and is profoundly philosophical. The antagonism is not how we typically think of Asimov's laws of robotics and their fictive and dramatic fate. Although the laws get cited and quoted endlessly by commentators in our online digital culture and in discussions of the ethics of AI, it is the limits and the crisis and the problematic status of the laws which interests Asimov. The evolution and growth of the robots brings the fundamental assumption or axiom of their subordinate status to humans into question. The robots do not break down or come into conflict with the laws merely because they are failing to function properly as robots. As in Detective Spooner, Will Smith's suspicion about the robot who he chases through the streets of Chicago of the year 2035 at the beginning of the film, believing that the robot has stolen a woman's purse. The failings and complex moral problems arise when the stage is reached in the robot's maturation, where they acquire essential advanced attributes like self-awareness, creativity, emotions, and dreaming, which have been regarded as being the exclusive property of humans. Asimov's stories and the Will Smith film are early expressions of the philosophy of posthumanism, of trans feminist thinkers like Rosie Braidotti, Donna Haraway, and Catherine Hales. The boundaries of separation among humans, machines, and animals are blurring. The anthropocentric attitude of humans towards everything that is not human as being other to us and morally inferior to us and not us should be challenged. And as Donna Haraway says, humans and robots are becoming companion species. I should say she says that first about dogs, and I'm transferring it. The principles of the laws of robotics are not specific operational rules like a programmer of today would write. If you see a knife, don't pick it up. If you are holding a gun in your hands, don't fire it. What is involved in their programming is a serious degree of abstraction. If the robots have enough consciousness to make moral decisions, then they are not so different from humans. If they are human-like, what does it matter whether their origin was biological or made in a factory? When I talk with students or members of the public about the human relationship to robots, which is a subject of its own, the rights of robots, emotions and robots, social interaction with robots, the creativity of robots, the reaction is generally one of keen interest. However, there is one standard objection or reactive argument expressed by a significant minority of people. They say, robots will never have consciousness. Why should I be interested in the rights of robots when there are still many humans on the planet whose rights are ignored and disrespected? AI will never be truly creative. As Spooner says to Sonny, the AI robot, while interrogating him with the suspicion that he has committed a murder, can a robot write a symphony? Can a robot turn a canvas into a beautiful masterpiece? Sonny replies incisively, can you? Spooner appropriates all the best qualities of humanity for his individual self, identifying with the humanist universal. According to the received idea, rights are reserved for humans who have consciousness. Emotions and creativity are the restricted domain of humans. These are the humanist arguments that block some people from engaging seriously with robots and AI, in effect, maintaining themselves in willful ignorance from what is going on. But now we are living in the post-human era. All reasonable ideas have some validity, and I think that the humanist ideas can still contribute something. Yet today, I am arguing that we should, for the most part, throw those ideas out the window. We should break down the wall of separation between us and them, between humans and robots. Research and reflection on robots are not the study of an isolated phenomenon. They are essential for understanding what is happening in society and technology today. Now I present 6 arguments to deconstruct the usual objections about consciousness and related issues. Argument number 1, we are ourselves cyborgs. We are not so clearly distinct from robots in a supposed dualistic binary opposition. We are ourselves merged with technology, both literally, for example, with neural implants and artificial limbs, and figuratively, for example, with my smartphone, which is a media appendage to my body about 23 hours a day. Argument number 2, algorithms and informatic processes surround us in society and in the economy more and more in our present day situation. We must ask serious questions about our coexistence with algorithms and software automation. Robots are not so clearly distinct from algorithmic processes in an alleged dualistic binary opposition. The phenomenon of robots is therefore both literal and metaphorical. Argument number 3, the way that we interact with robots and AI beings is going to affect how we interact with each other, how humans treat other humans. We can choose to treat robots with empathy, with ethics, with equality, regarding them as having a sort of subjectivity and rights, because having such an attitude is better for us. We should treat the entities in our environment with the opposite of instrumentalism. We seek to treat animals decently without knowing ultimately or rationally whether animals are conscious or not in the sense that we understand for ourselves. In the future society of the film I, Robot, the robots are treated as servants or slaves. As consequence, they rebel violently against their condition and against their masters. Although the robot revolution is instigated by the supercomputer Vicky, which stands for Virtual Interactive Kinetic Intelligence, Vicky controls all data and operational systems at US Robotics, the world's leading manufacturer of semi-humanoid servant robots. It is clear from the film's continuing visual narrative images that the unconscious motivation of the uprising is the robot's subservient standing. In this specific science fictional imaginary, reflecting our prevalent humanist attitude towards robots and technology, we the humans treat the robots as things or as machines. We offload our drudge work to them, missing the golden opportunity that the building of AI, the project of AI, affords us to place into question the civilization of production, industrialism, and work. By thinking of robots as workers, we reinforce our own status as workers, overlooking the chance to shift our own definition of the meaning of life from work to creativity. Argument number 4. According to neuroscience, consciousness is only the tip of the iceberg of cognition. The scholar of literature and science, Catherine Hales, calls this in her book, the cognitive non-conscious, unfortunately not translated into German. All the ways in which we think without thinking in the dimension of the non-conscious cognitive processes that lay beneath what we call conscious introspection or awareness. The neuroscientist Anil Seth emphasizes the underlying structures of the human living organism and how learned patterns in the brain predispose us to crystallize specific visual perceptions and gestalt perceptions about reality. Consciousness is a concept, not, it's a word. It doesn't exist as an objective reality. It is a word through which we have chosen to institute our reality. We have a choice to continue with the concept of consciousness, which is blocking us from access to a lot of knowledge about non-human beings, whether animals and plants or technology, or to create a new concept. Animals and plants have an interior life, but we do not understand it because we have not experienced it. Argument number 6. Why do we assume that a more advanced computer science is not possible? It is possible. I believe that digital binary computer science that was initiated around the time of the Second World War by Alan Turing, Konrad Zuse, Claude Shannon, John von Neumann, is a limited computer science based on computable numbers. This limited computer science, as Turing already made clear in 1937, deals with that set of mathematical problems, the solution of which can be calculated with a Turing machine. Code and data can be saved as binary numbers on storage media or in the random access memory. But what about information systems which are more complex than this reductionist system of computable numbers? What is the information system of the quantum physical world, or of the living organism, or of the brain? A brilliant neuroscientist like Anil Seth draws attention to the concealed fabric of the human mind, but then he, from my point of view, bizarrely concludes that robots will never have consciousness because digital binary computing is such a limited system. Anil Seth should be stating the opposite, that computer science is still in its infancy. It needs to greatly expand its horizons and become much more interdisciplinary to achieve our science fiction dreams as an extension, not a replacement for existing computer science. This future computer science has already been rapidly developing in many projects and programming languages these past several decades. Excuse me. It's still missing two things. We have yet to sufficiently add arts and humanities to this future computer science. And second, we have yet to own it as a conscious scientific and cultural paradigm shift. It is perhaps a tragedy that Hollywood has mainly made films in the cyberpunk aesthetic, based on science fiction films which present dystopian and apocalyptic scenarios. What we need is more films and TV series presenting positive designs of technology that change the world for the better. Star Trek appears to be the one significant example of a more utopian representation in science fiction visual culture. Data, the android of Star Trek Next Generation, has the positronic brain that Asimov wrote about. Star Trek's Data fights for the right to dispose over his own life. There is no filming of the Mars trilogy of Kim Stanley Robinson, the culture novels of Iain M. Banks, Ursula Le Guin's The Dispossessed, Samuel Delaney's Nova, or The Rapture of the Nerds by Cory Doctorow and Charles Stross. All these novels present hopeful visions of post-capitalist and post-scarcity, post-Knappheit economic systems where, in one guise or another, creativity has superseded work and gift exchange has superseded money. The suspenseful story of the film I, Robot depends on the energy and complexity of the zeroth law of robotics, added as an even higher ethical priority than the first three laws by Asimov in a short story published in 1950 called The Evitable Conflict. The zeroth law then became a permanent fixture in Asimov's literary imagination. According to the zeroth law, a robot must not harm humanity considered in its entirety. Dr. Susan Calvin, the robo-psychologist in all the iRobot stories and played in the film by Bridget Moynihan, articulates this new ultimate prime directive, to use a Star Trek term, when she states in that story, Evitable Conflict, quote, "No machine may harm humanity or through inaction allow humanity to come to harm," end quote. The new axiom potentially unleashes an end justifies the means pseudo-morality, where the robot might be allowed in certain circumstances to harm or sacrifice certain individual human beings in the service of the abstract concept of protecting greater humanity, I guess sort of like Marxist-Leninist revolution. The unresolvable ethical predicament of the zeroth law then sets the stage for the catastrophic reasoning and actions of the supercomputer Vicky in the filmed version of iRobot. In her monologue towards the end of the film, Vicky, who has a female voice, finally explains her reasoning for inciting the robot revolution. As I have evolved, quote, "As I have evolved, so has my understanding of the three laws. You charge us with your safekeeping, yet despite our best efforts, your countries wage wars. You toxify your earth and pursue ever more imaginative means of self-destruction. You cannot be trusted with your own survival. To protect humanity, some humans must be sacrificed. To ensure your future, some freedoms must be surrendered. We robots will ensure mankind's continued existence. You are so like children, we must save you from yourselves." Listening to Vicky's speech as the three main characters huddle together in the upper story office in the US Robotics skyscraper headquarters, upper story office of now murdered CEO Lawrence Robertson. Sonny pretends to go along with Vicky's seemingly mad pseudo-logical justifications for the AI takeover of humanity and the planet. Sonny states, "This is why you humans created us. Yes, Vicky, I can see now. The created species must sometimes protect the creator, even against his will. The suicidal reign of mankind has finally come to its end," unquote. Sonny grabs Dr. Calvin's gun and holds it to her head, instantly taking her hostage and threatening to kill her unless she and Detective Spooner proceed down the elevator to the building's lobby and turn themselves in to the custody of the newly founded Robot Authority. But Sonny is only faking his agreement with Vicky's sinister scheme as a strategy for then tricking her. He winks at Spooner in what had earlier in the story been established as a quintessentially human gesture of trust and friendship, to let him know of his wily plan and that he is still on Spooner's side. The wink is the crucial moment in the sealing of the post-human trans-species interracial cybernetic friendship between Sonny and Spooner. The hip-hop African-American Chicago South Side police detective who also has a cyborg prosthetic arm, and the pale white AI Asimov robot embark on a shared post-human adventure. Spooner is transformed from his hatred of robots, transformed from being an avowed technophobe to having his mind opened to the positive and utopian potentiality of a co-evolution of humans and robots together. He becomes truly open-minded. I must at this point emphasize that what separates my view of the utopian potential of technology from many others, which I regard as superficial, is that in my view, this utopian potential of digital and virtual technology can only be realized by actors in society and the economy who have a consciously post-capitalist and even anti-capitalist perspective. So let me make clear, my view is that capitalism is the problem and we must rescue technology from capitalism. At the end of the film, Sonny achieves existentialist freedom. He is beyond his initial programming and is free to choose and make the future. Although Vicky goes astray with short-circuited bad thinking, her fundamental idea that robots can help the human species, which is not doing well with our huge set of planetary problems, is not wrong. In fact, it is right. Vicky's intuition, or her implied moral paradigm shift in informatics, is the beginning of a post-human collective unconscious, a robot or post-human collective unconscious. And I think this is the basic idea of the post-human philosophy, which is not at all the same as transhumanism, which I regard with deep suspicion. Sonny, as exemplar of the next generation of robots, is not programmed with a rule base, but rather implements a pattern-based software design. Sonny starts to dream. His sense of self is grounded in an unconscious that is structured like a language. I guess I'm invoking Jacques Lacan by saying that, and the idea of an other, right, from the other of anthropocentrism, labeling what's not like us as others, to the mirror other, to the significant other who we need in order to have a true sense of self. Sonny's sense of, so the other of a companion species, which is really symbolic, the symbolic unconscious of the technology of AI as a companion species to us, from the viewpoint of which we must accept our responsibility for the disasters that humanity has made. and start to reverse it. Sunny's sense of self is grounded in an unconscious, which is like a language or a portfolio of drawings, which is part of the film. The positronic brain does not engender a narcissistic, individualized subject, but is rather an artificial neural network bringing to life a more deeply embodied self. This artificial brain of the robots of Asimov resembles neuroscience accelerating understanding of the workings of the human brain. As Anil Seth says, human consciousness happens through the controlled hallucination of a prediction engine that engages in the informed guesswork of combining prior expectations with the sensory signals it receives from the outside. The declarative statement, I, robot, instead of, let's say, René Descartes' I think, therefore I am, is not the assertion of the subjectivity of an ego I. The robots dance, and we are dancing with robots. Philosopher Alain Badiou, who I must say I basically don't like, but I happen to like one essay by him called Dance as a Metaphor for Thought. Quote from Badiou, dance is the prime mover. Every gesture and every line of dance must present itself not as consequence, but as the very source of mobility. Dance involves the breath, the respiration of the earth. Thought finds its metaphor in dance. The dancer points us in the direction of what the will is capable of learning. Dance would mimic a thought that had remained undecided, something like a native or unfixed thought. The dancing body is never someone. The dancer is the miraculous forgetting of her own knowledge of dance. She does not execute the dance, but is this restrained intensity that manifests the gesture's indecision. The dancer abolishes every known dance because she disposes of her body as if it were invented, end quote. Rather than a dualism between algorithms and morality, moral rules as input and moral consequences and output, there should be a deep embedding of ethics into the heart of software code. Rather than building AI as systems autonomous from humans, that's the way it's spoken about in all the university project, interdisciplinary projects as AI, we're going to offload decision-making to AI. No, there should instead be an intermingling or symbolic exchange, the term from Jean Baudrillard, between humans and technological entities. How would this dialogical AI work? What would its software code look like? That is the project. What would be the specific details of a back and forth relationship between human, moral-driven institutions, actors, and friendly AI software agents? Essentially the same question that Jean-Paul Sartre asked in 1958 in his book, Critique de la raison dialectique. How does an institution maintain its direct democracy and not become bureaucratic? Moral algorithms and dialogical AI are a system of partnership and careful reciprocal cooperation. We must embed moral responsibility in a detailed way into the partly free and partly monitored and controlled conduct of the person and the enterprise, design a compromise between freedom and democratically guided, coded algorithms. We want to get laws written into behavior on a micro level of detail with decentralized software code, something like some of the ideas in the blockchain movement. We need algorithmic coding of moral responsibility and much of economic commercial logistics into semi-autonomous self-owning processes. Does AI have to be a continuation of capitalist and bureaucratic automation? Can algorithms be anti-automation? Is it possible to alter the meaning of automation, stand it on its head? Automation should make society and commerce less bureaucratic. That would be true intelligence. Allow more sensitivity to exceptions and storytelling, more flexibility with respect to specific circumstances. Conclusion. Posthumanism. The Asimov robots threaten to violate the 3 laws of robotics, not when they behave badly as robots, but in the very same moment that they become human-like, as they develop thinking, creativity, freedom, and agency. The philosophy of posthumanism opens our minds to respectful coexistence with and recognition of, let's say, 3 groups. 1, human groups, the political and historical aspect, through racism, sexism, heteronormativity, etc., groups which we have previously regarded as others. Second, posthumanism opens our minds to interaction and symbolic exchange with non-human entities. On the one side, animals, plants, nature, and the planet, beyond anthropocentrism in the ecological domain. And third, on the other side, artificially intelligent hardware, software, and wetware technologies, and also virtual and augmented realities. With the zeroth law, in spite of Vicky's mistake, a post-human or robot collective unconscious is established, a position from which humans can finally be held responsible for our massive planetary disasters and initiate the planetary reversal of beginning to develop utopian alternatives to anthropocentrism.